Hello and welcome back to Shh, the Girls Are Racing. My name's Miranda and today we're going to be talking about the Singapore round that has just happened this past weekend. I finally found some time to film. It's been a little bit difficult with uni and stuff, but here we are. I'm ready to review the race. I actually wanted to do something a little bit different today. And I want to kind of change my entire format, actually. I didn't want today to be going by qualifying race 1 and race 2. I want to really focus on the storylines of the weekend because there were so many amazing things that happened, and I feel like that could be kind of an interesting way to structure this video review. I will say before I start, of course, if you don't like it, that's completely fine. Like, I would love to hear your feedback. Let me know in the comments if you feel like I should return to the old format, because I literally can. It would be no issue at all. So if you feel like this is not the vibe, definitely let me know. I'm so open to feedback. I'm just trying something new, but completely happy to kind of revert to the old structure because I know that was quite easy to follow. This is just going to be a little bit more about kind of focusing on the things that happened rather than going through it very systematically, I guess. But yeah, the lighting's also a bit odd because I'm filming this quite late in the day. We have daylight savings in Australia now, or at least on the East Coast, in some states. So I guess it means it's nice and bright, even though it's quite late. But I think that the lighting might change quite drastically in a little bit. So we'll try and get through this. We'll try and be really quick. So I actually want to start my storylines with actually the weather. The weather is number one for me. So race 1, I wrote down some stats and I put it on my Instagram. I had made a post being like, everyone's talking about how bad the sprint idea is because I have to do it in the middle of the day for F1. Well, F1 Academy actually races in Singapore during the day and how nightmarish it is. What I did update that post with was the kind of weather stats of race 1 on that Saturday. And they were around a 33-degree temperature in Singapore normally. There was somewhere between 60 and 80% humidity. I couldn't find an exact stat, so that was like my rough amount. And it was 52 degrees on track. And that's the temperatures they're racing with. So even regardless with a less physical car, with less laps, oh my goodness, I can't imagine doing anything in 52 degrees in a race suit, in fireproofs, with a helmet, with gloves. I would simply perish. Like, they're just so impressive what they do. And Singapore to me, it seems a little bit dangerous, to be really honest. But nonetheless, these were such difficult conditions. And for them to race in those conditions, I just thought it was so impressive because, as I said, it's just so difficult. It would just be so taxing on your body and so physical. So the fact that they even raced it all, I mean, I was just really impressed. Like 52 degrees. Anyway, race 2 had some crazy weather. So we went into the race knowing that there were some clouds, like some clouds in the distance that seemed to be, getting closer. And it started raining during the race and it started pouring, but it seemed like it started raining only in one section of the track. I don't know if that's true or not, but it definitely seemed like some parts remained dry while some got insanely wet and people were sliding all over the place. So that added some even further complications to everyone's race strategy. And yeah, the weather was definitely a storyline in Singapore this round because everything was so interchangeable, and the fact that we could have such different conditions on each day for each race just spiced things up a whole heap more. Okay, so my first storyline of the weekend is the wildcard, Lisa Billard, sponsored by Gatorade. I'm not entirely sure. I will correct myself on screen. I think she recently turned 16 and she also participated in the F1 Academy rookie test that happened in, I think it's Navarra, Spain. Basically, 18 rookies got to go out for a day and a couple of sessions to kind of test these cars, show off their skills to potential teams on the grid, on the F1 Academy grid, because I think, if I recall correctly, I made a post on my Instagram. I think there's 7 or 8 free seats for next year. I think actually all the seats are technically up for grabs because it's based on funding and stuff like that. But there are, at the very least, I think 7 or 8 girls that are going to graduate out of F1 Academy because they've done their 2 years. So all these 18 girls are looking to impress, right? And Lisa Billard has been in French F4 this season. She's done really well. She took out number 1 women's spot. And as far as I know, she did really well in the rookie test as well. I think she was at least once in the top 3. Either way, I recall her results being quite impressive. So this was kind of, I think, as she turned 16 and became eligible for actually competing in F1 Academy, this was kind of the natural next step up. She's an Iron Dame supported driver, and Dorianne is also an Iron Dame supported driver, so perhaps there's like some network there, and I think it actually made a lot of sense for her to join as the wildcard in this race because she kind of has that resume in French F4 already. So I was just really excited to see what she could do now that she was eligible to race in F1 Academy, and I think she's definitely up for a seat next year, by the way. I think that could be a really good shout. This is Gatorade's second sponsorship of this year. You would also recall that they sponsored Matilda Pats in Canada, and all the wildcards race for High Tech, right? She was towards the end of qualifying in P3, and it was insane. Like, she's had her rookie test and she's driven in an F4 car quite frequently, but this is her first time out in F1 Academy and she's beaten the majority of the grid. She ended up qualifying in the end in P5, and that is quite insane. She's beat like 12, 13 other drivers to that spot. And for this to be her first time out in F1 Academy against these races, that was extremely impressive. It was like an Esme Kosterman level performance, but the best performance of a wildcard we've seen this season so far. And I think that raised a few eyebrows of, wow, she's just brand new, newly 16, and she's come and blown it out of the park. So a very, very impressive showing from Lisa Billard. So she would have this amazing qualifying position, and obviously everyone was like, well, this is going to be another wildcard that scores points. And this is where the disappointment kind of kicked in. Race 1 for her ended quite prematurely. I think I recall, I'll insert a picture if I was correct. She had car issues. She had to retire the car, but I think her brakes were on fire at one point, or something was on fire on her car. There was definitely smoke. Obviously, that's just completely not her fault at all. I think that she was dropping a few places before this exit because obviously it's a new environment to be racing in. Qualifying is fastest laps, but racing against all these girls who've been racing against each other the whole season, and she's coming into this unfamiliar environment, that's quite a big ask, right? So for her to kind of lose a few places, I think that's quite natural, but she was still going really, really well before this kind of car issue happened. So that was such a shame. Anyway, all these issues did actually mean that she had to have her engine changed for race 2. Which obviously, because she qualified P5, she was P4 in race 1 and she would start P5 in race 2 with this brand new engine. So we are for sure going to be talking about race 2 strategy and everything that happened. But just to talk about Lisa Billard's race 2, she kind of had a gamble. Her team took a gamble on putting on the wet tires, and so that meant that she ended outside of the points. And that was obviously really disappointing because based on that qualifying, she very much was a shoe-in for these wildcard points. But I think that basically half the grid had this issue with the unlucky strategy, which we'll get into. So in my head, that's just not really her fault. And she definitely impressed this round. And I honestly will be very surprised if she doesn't get a permanent seat next year, if she doesn't have a permanent spot on the grid, because it was a very impressive performance. And maybe there's some things to do on racecraft, but I would say for certain that there is potential. And she was just really impressive, and props to her. And I think we're going to see her on the grid next year. In fact, I'm just so certain. Obviously, I know no one. I don't know anything about how that works, but I don't know. I just feel like she showed so much, and she took this opportunity and she made the most of it. And that's all you can really ask of a wild card, I think. So the next storyline I obviously want to talk about is Miss Leah Block with her first win in F1 Academy. How special. It was so good. Coming off the podium in Zandvoort, her first podium, to the next round to winning a race. From pole, by the way. She won the race from pole because it was a reverse grid race and she qualified P8. I'm just so happy for her. It's been a long time coming. It's so deserved in my mind, and it just shows how much her racecraft has improved as well. And her qualifying has improved quite a bit too, in my opinion. But I'm just so happy for her. It feels deserved. It feels like she's put in the work and she's got the reward for it. And yeah, it was so nice to see Jamie Chadwick at the podium. It was so nice to see James Vowles speaking to her on the grid just before the race started and before they went on their formation laps. But yeah, I don't know. It was just really nice. And it felt like the whole Williams family really came together. The whole Williams fan base as well really came together to celebrate this moment for Leah, which was just so special. And yeah, I'm a Williams fan myself. So this was just such a proud, happy moment. And to be honest, I obviously watched the Netflix series. I watched it like within days, and I watched the whole thing in one afternoon. It was incredible. I sobbed my way through it, as we all know, because I made a video about it. But Leah's relationship with her mom and her siblings, especially following the tragedy that their family has faced, it was so special. And to watch her constantly kind of miss out on podiums and stuff because she was clearly still learning and playing catch up to the girls who had been in single seaters for a very long time. It was so tough. And when she lost out on that podium to Dorianne, it was difficult, right? To see her go through that. And so for her to get a podium and then get this win, and to watch when she parks up in the pit lane in Parc Ferme, to see her mum and her hugging and her mum was crying, I literally started crying. We all know I'm a crier. But it was just so emotional to see her have this success that it really feels like she deserves after all this time. And I know no one in sport, deserves anything, but I don't know. I guess I do kind of feel that way, that she's put in the work, we've seen the improvement, and the results were to come. And the results came, and her mother got to be there with her. And I just felt like it really was all that hard work paying off, and it was just really special. So it was so emotional and just so lovely to see. And as I said, she held that first place from pole to finish. And I think there was some crazy things going on behind her, and she managed to hold strong, didn't make any mistakes. And yeah, go Leah, what racecraft, nothing to say but congratulations to her. It was an excellent race from her. Because sure, she gets pole from reverse grid. I know some people have an issue with reverse grid races, but she made the most of it. You have to finish in P1, right? Pole is just a convenient first step. It's not the be all end all. We've seen so many of the competitors lose pole in a reverse grid race and not win the race. She had to put in the work still to win. And so it's just so special for her, and so special for ART as well. They've had a tough season this season. The drivers have faced a lot of hard luck and crashes and things have gone on. So it's so nice for them as well to see them get that recognition that, I think they deserve. I will also say, as sort of a side note to Leah's story, Aurelia qualified P2 because of that reverse grid. So she would have qualified P7, and she was so close, and she ended up finishing that race in a season high position of P4. So it was a really excellent race from her, but she obviously qualified P2 for the reverse grid and was looking to either win the race or at least podium. So I can understand that was probably a disappointing finish from her, but her and Leah had a crazy turn one because Aurelia kind of got the better of her a little bit, but they both went off. And so that gave Leah a bit of an advantage going into the next sort of section of the track. And I think Aurelia did go on the radio and say, oh, well, she went off, she has to give the position back. But the truth is they both went off, and Leah couldn't have gone back onto the track, or she couldn't have stayed on the track without hitting Aurelia. So that was kind of what happened there and why Leah faced no consequences. And I completely agree with that. I think it was just both of them just going off, and those things happen. And Maya Berg very quickly made her way through and got the better of Aurelia. So Maya Berg got the better of her, and then Chloe Chambers naturally came through as well. Someone who was racing with a bit of a vengeance to stay in the championship battle after her car wouldn't even start in race 2 in Zandvoort, and she lost the opportunity for so many points. I do believe Chloe Chambers is now mathematically out of the Drivers' Championship, which is so unfortunate. She's had an amazing year this year. It sucks that it has ended this way. I guess that's how you would say it. But I think anyone who watches F1 Academy and has watched her race in general knows that she's good and knows that she has so much potential. And the fact that she hasn't necessarily won this Drivers' Championship, that doesn't define her racing abilities. I just think that her not winning this doesn't define her time in F1 Academy. I think that people who have watched the races, such as myself, know that pole after pole she's secured. She's been so good in the races, just showing so much talent. And I think that cannot be taken away from her at all. I will just drop this here quickly as well, because I don't really think it's its own kind of story. But Chloe and Ella were battling really hard in that first race. And maybe that perhaps allowed Leah to really get away, and Maya too to some extent, but she took a little bit longer to get through the field, so it wasn't like a hold your breath battle between Leah and Maya like it was in Zandvoort. It was a little bit more chill. I think Maya finished around a second behind Leah, but Chloe and Ella were doing some crazy battling. And Ella ended up getting a penalty, which kind of dropped her down quite a bit. And it was kind of interesting. I'm not sure she deserved it. She definitely thought she didn't deserve it based on her radio. But I also thought at one point that Chloe kind of pushed her off a little bit and didn't get any consequences for that. So I don't know. I thought it was a little bit interesting. But fair's fair. Ella ended up post-race just accepting what happened and moving on, and she ended up doing really well in race 2. So, but yeah, I guess that was sort of another interesting battle that went on during race 1. That Leah won, guys. She won. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is sort of two storylines in one, but we'll get through it all. And I would be silly. I would be a silly Billy if I attempted in any way, shape, or form to ignore the dominance of Maya Berg. I am a Dorian supporter. I would ideally like to see Dorian win this championship, but Maya Berg, post-Canada, has come back with a vengeance. Her performance in Zandvoort was nothing short of insanity. And in Singapore, she continued to show her talent. She has got incredible racecraft. She has got the poles to prove it. Her growth, even in this season alone, we know that she's a good racer from last season from her sort of racing resume, but she has just come back with a vengeance post-Canada, and it's been really impressive. And I think there's something like less than 10 points between her and Dorian now heading into Las Vegas, which is the season finale, and I'm so stressed. But even though I do want Dorian to win, I'll be honest, I am not going to ignore the fact of Maya Berg's dominance. She's incredible, and she deserves her flowers. What a comeback after all the technical issues, which were also out of her control in Montreal. She has just been so impressive that I mean, maybe it's a tad recency bias because the season's been, over this whole year. But I'm just thinking about Zandvoort and Singapore and thinking, oh my God, what is Dorian going to do if we see a performance like that from Maya Berg in Las Vegas? Because she's just been on beast mode. She's been on another level in these last two rounds, in my opinion. And I think that's been shown no less than through her pole secured for race 2, which is the feature race, of course, so full 25 points. But also, that qualifies her for P8 in the reverse grid race, right? She finished P2. That is bonkers. She made her way through the field. She just cut through them like a knife, just made her way calmly through like a snake in the grass and just silent killer. But there you are, P2. And only a second behind Leah as well, after qualifying P8. Like, I know there were sort of, things going on that she could take advantage of as well, but that's racing. Crashes and people making mistakes and stuff. She capitalized on all of it to NP2. And making up those 6 positions, it's talent and it's dominance. And to win race 2 as boldly as she did, it's dominance. And I just have no idea what's going to happen in Las Vegas, to be really honest. That's what I keep thinking about. But in talking about Maya Berg's race 2, that is a bit of a controversial one. It's not controversial anymore, but it was controversial when it happened, so we need to talk about it. Maya got off to a poor start. I think that's fair to say. Dorian took the lead. Dorian would then have the lead for the entire race, including through a safety car that went on for like at least 3 laps. I think it would have went on for a little bit longer, but it was at least 3 laps. There was one final lap of the race without a safety car. So what they called that is just one racing lap. 1 lap to make your mark. Of course, the field is bunched up now behind a safety car, which definitely helps. But still, you've got to make the move. Singapore is known to be difficult to overtake. Granted, these cars, these F4 cars, they're slightly easier, I think, to overtake. There's no DRS, but the cars are quite a bit smaller, so that means there's a lot more track surface for them to kind of overtake on. At least that's how I understand it. I'm just a fan, so I could be saying like complete made up things right now. But my understanding is, even though they don't have DRS, it is, or it can be, I should say, slightly easier to overtake. It was still raining. The safety car was caused by a crash caused by the rain. It was still raining. It had cleared up a bit. It dried up slightly, and there were still parts of the track, as I said in the weather thing. There were parts of the track that were dry, but there were also parts of the track that were wet, but seemed to be drying up. Maya Berg made an insane overtake on Dorian to win the race. In the final lap of this entire race that she has been in P2, she fully licked the stamp and sent it up the inside. Off she goes, overtakes Dorian and wins the race. It was incredible. And she continues to cut down the deficit to Dorian by 7 points just in that race, not to mention even the reverse grid race. I don't know what else I can say except for the fact that it was an incredible racing move and showed her hunger for this title. And I don't think Dorian should be worried per se, but she should be giving some side eye. She should be checking over her shoulder because Maya Berg is coming for that title. It was a move of hunger, a proper racing driver in F1 Academy who's looking for that win, going for the gap, and it was incredible. Now back to the penalty, back to the controversy I mentioned. During the safety car, Dorian, Maya Berg, Ella, and 7 or so other drivers, because about the top 10, I want to say the top 9 or 10 didn't pit. So they were following the safety car for many laps on slicks, just, doing their best to stay on track and keep everything normal, hold down the fort, make sure no crashing, no sliding, none of that, right? Maya, at one point, it seemed like Dorian and Maya were trying to bait each other to go pit for wets, and there wasn't enough laps to get anything out of those wet tires or those intermediates, whatever they swapped to. And I think eventually the top 3, 4, 5 realized that, but they were still kind of baiting each other. And Mayaberg at one point went over the line of what many consider pit stop line, or what do you call that? I don't recall what that is called. When you go in for your pit stop, the pit lane. Anyone who watched this just watched me have a complete mental blank, but I almost had a mental blank on that word. But anyway, she went into the pit lane, sort of. She crossed the white line behind the safety car, behind Dorian. Then she crossed back onto the racing line. Ella, who's behind her in P3, immediately goes on the radio, says, excuse me, she went over the pit lane line. Like, you can't do that, excuse me. And the team goes, yeah, like, thanks for telling us, blah, blah, blah. And everyone is like, ooh. And we watch the replay and we all go, ooh, she did. She did go over this white line that many fans perceive as like the pit lane line that once you go over it, you can't cross back out onto the regular racetrack. She goes on and she overtakes Dorian, and everyone's wondering, she wasn't put under investigation. We're hearing nothing about it from the commentary. We're hearing nothing about it post-race. Except in the cool-down room, Dorian and Ella were talking about it a little bit. Ella was like, I don't think she could do that. And Dorian was like, I don't know. And they were both like, but nothing more was really said about it. Sorry, hold on. It's gotten really dark all of a sudden. I'm gonna turn the light on. Hold on. Well, I don't really like this yellowy light that's going on, but it got really dark all of a sudden, so we're just gonna roll with this for now. But where was I? I know where I was. We had this penalty controversy. But Maya, she goes up onto the podium, she sort of cheers, P1, Lewis Hamilton's there, Susie Wolff is there. It's this big Ferrari celebration because F1 Academy and the Junior Series is like the only place they're cooking. Basically, the show just goes on. And to be honest, we're all a bit confused because we're kind of watching back her cross over this line that we perceive as the pit lane line, like the line of no return, if you will, that you're going to get a penalty if you change your mind and like rejoin the race. It's just like a white painted line, but there's no breaks in the line. Like, it's just a straight line. So a lot of people perceive that as like, you've made your choice to go into the pits. You actually can't back out of that without getting a penalty. So the podium and everything went on as normal. Social media, the F1 Instagram, in collaboration with the F1 Academy Instagram, posted, Maya Berg race winner. The comments were about the penalty, of course, this potential penalty that hadn't yet been investigated or applied. And F1 Academy stewards, I don't know who they are, but they are normally very swift and decisive in handing out penalties and warnings and things like that. But we were all kind of waiting to hear about this penalty. I know I commented, like, when will we hear the outcome of this? Because that is what I wanted to know. I was not entirely sure myself what the rule was around this because, as we all know, the rules around F1 Academy are slightly different to F1. They don't just roll entirely with the F1 rules. So I was waiting to hear, and a lot of people replied to me being like, oh yes, slam dunk penalty, and then others were like, no way it's a penalty, look at the rules. But then in my head, I'm like, well, F1 Academy has slightly adapted rules, so I'm not just going to go look at the F1 rules. But anyway, I said that I had been hearing different things, so I just wanted to know when we would hear about the penalty. It was clear that a lot of people wanted answers. Regardless of what those answers were, people wanted a conclusion to what we perceived as a bit of like an open ending to this race. I follow many racing news pages about women in motorsport. So there's this excellent Instagram page, and they also have a blog called Races Behind the Helmet. I always shout them out because they do such good articles, blogs. They have an excellent blog. And so they were the only ones, as far as I could see, made an article or a post about how Maya Berg had visited the stewards after the race and everything was cleared as all good. So what transpired, what we found out, is that F1 Academy, like all these series, has a driver's briefing, and the drivers were briefed that for F1 Academy purposes, going over that unbroken white line, that was not entering the pit lane for those purposes, to the extent that if you cross back over, you would get a penalty. That was not committing yourself to the pit lane for F1 Academy purposes. What the drivers had been told in their briefing is that there was, I believe it was a blue line. I'll add screenshots if I'm incorrect. I'll correct myself on screen. But there was a blue line, and once you got past that, that was when in F1 Academy you committed yourself to the pit lane. And if you cross that line, then you would indeed face a penalty. Maya Berg did not do that. She only crossed a white unbroken line. So because she didn't cross that blue line, she was just considered to be racing as normal, just kind of going to the sides and coming back into the racing line. Like there was no issue. I know Ella pulled it up, but it's clear from what we know about the driver's briefing, what information they were communicated, and Maya's meeting with the stewards afterwards, that everything is good. The podium stands, the win stands, and everything is okay. There is no penalty, and that is completely acceptable to me personally. I'm really glad to know that that is what happened. I'm glad to have this cleared up because, again, I really think it's important for the fans to also know that that win was legitimate, because Maya deserves to be fully credited and fully praised for her win. There shouldn't be like an asterisk or a caveat for something that was never cleared up with fans. So I do really applaud Races Behind the Helmet for clearing this up for so many fans. I'm quite happy to say that Maya fully deserved that win. No penalty need be imposed. It's fair to ask the question, I think, from Ella, especially if you don't have full visibility, like you might as well just ask. But in saying that, Maya Berg fully deserves her win. She should be 100% congratulated, and it only solidifies just how dominant she has been and the improvements that she's been making over the season, and just how intense this final round in Las Vegas is going to be. Dorian v Maya, who knows what's going to happen? I'm so excited, but I'm already stressed. I'm just so stressed already. I'm like, who's going to win? I kind of want them both to win. I'd prefer Dorian to win, but they're both so incredible and they both deserve it, and they both deserve the funding for next year. So I'm like, I don't know. But all I know is it's going to be a tense one. It's going to be a nail biter. And I do know that I'm very excited. So, in discussing Maya's Race 2 win, we can also quickly touch on a storyline, which was Race 2 strategy. Now, I mentioned the weather, I mentioned the rain, and that caused about 8 drivers to pit for it was either intermediates or wets. I don't know which one they use in F1 Academy. I think it might be wet tires. They swap for those. And that was in the expectation that the safety car would end quite a bit earlier and they would get some racing laps, right? That didn't happen. And the 10 or so girls that managed to stay out, they kept it together on the slicks in the wet, and they were able to secure the top 10 and therefore the points for themselves. And so no one who made that call to pit and change tires actually ended up with points. So I think that that's actually quite interesting. It really just shows how difficult race strategy can be in such a short race, just 14 laps or so, and when you don't know when the safety car is going to end. I think the girls on the wet tires did catch up to the top 10 by the end of the race, but there was just no time to do overtaking or anything. So it was a gamble that didn't pay off for about half of the field, which I think that's really interesting. But it just goes to show just what strategy is like in such a short race and with unpredictable weather conditions like we had. And it's really interesting. As I said, Lisa Billard did end up without points, and so did Chloe Chambers, because she was one of the ones who gambled on changing tyres. Yeah, it's just the way these things go sometimes, and it's tough. But those who stayed out, they also took a gamble that they could keep their car on track and not crash or make a mistake. And they did that. So full props to them. It was an incredible call for them to stay out as well. And that also meant, which was really exciting, that Joanne Seconte got some points as well. Go Australia. And none other than Courtney Crone got her first point, P10. It was amazing. Her first Croint. Courtney Crone point. Croint for short. She got her first point in the series. This is obviously her first year, and I'm happy for her. You know, she's had some tough goes of it this season. This season is incredibly competitive, but I'm just really happy for her to get her first points, and more to come in Las Vegas, I say. Let's bring it on. The next few things I think we can get through pretty quickly because this video is already going to be so ridiculously long. But anyway, Alicia's weekend. Alicia Palmovsky. She had a very, very difficult weekend. So I think that is sort of a storyline within its own. So she performs magnificently in the free practice that they have. I think she ended up like P3. So a really good sign for the weekend ahead. But she crashes in qualifying. So she ends up starting P18 both races. This is not the Alicia Palmovsky that we know. What we do know from Alicia is a rookie who is fearless in battle. She's an overtaker, and she normally qualifies in the top 4. So this was just really uncharacteristic for her to hit a wall and end up P18. It was quite strange, but mistakes like this do happen, right? Race 1. She's going strong. She's making her way through the field. As I said, she's a fearless overtaker. For only, I think she's 19. She is got some really promising racecraft that she's shown this year. But in race 1, while she's making her way through the field, she hits some sort of bump and then hits the wall. And she even said on the radio, like, I don't even know what just happened. And to be honest, even as I was watching live, I really didn't know what happened. I thought her car had just like randomly exploded. Like I thought it was a car failure, but it appears that she hit a bump, which meant she had like no control. She just hit the wall and then that was the end of it because the car was quite damaged. And that was a really unfortunate way for that race to end after she was making some promising overtakes and after the qualifying that she had. And then in race 2, she was once again making some really promising overtakes. She had a bit of a wobble, went off, and then had to remake those overtakes. But then she ended up being one of the races that gambled on the wet tires. She went into the pits to change her tires. And as I said, that was a gamble that didn't pay off for anyone that did that. And so she ended in the bottom 8 with no points. That rounded out a quite disappointing, quite frustrating weekend for Alicia. We know she's capable of so much more. She's a race winner in F1 Academy. So I think it's just a weekend to forget, to move on from, and prepare and get keen for Las Vegas because we know what she can do. And I think we will very quickly see her back at the top. And this was just a blimp in the journey. Everyone's going to have them. It was a tough weekend, but she's going to come out stronger. And I can't wait to see what she does in Las Vegas and fingers crossed next year as well. I also just want to quickly touch on Megan Bruce's performance. So she obviously stepped in for Ava Agnostiadis, who I believe fractured her foot, her left foot. She either broke it or fractured it, but it took her out of the weekend. She, I believe, is focused on trying to make it back to Las Vegas in time, to recover in time for that round. But until then, Singapore was off the cards because she obviously had to get surgery, do rehabilitation, all these things. So Megan Bruce was racing in her Tag Heuer car for High Tech. Megan is a GB4 driver. She's been competing in that series this year. She took part in that rookie test that I mentioned earlier, and she also had a really good performance in the sessions. I believe she was also, at the very least, in like the top 5 for both sessions, if not one session. So she was also quite impressive. So she was called up to do this race in Singapore. Now, I would like to mention the commentators told the audience she was asked to do this on the Monday, and the free practice, the qualifying is Friday, race 1 is Saturday, and race 2 is Sunday. That is such short notice. And I would also like to mention that a lot of the F1 Academy drivers, I mean, all of them knew they'd be doing this round, right, after Zandvoort. So they all went to do their cardio preparation for Singapore. We know it's extremely physical. And they would have also done their sauna prep. She got told on Monday. So that is virtually no cardio time, virtually no sauna prep, just using your baseline fitness to try and make it through one of the most physically challenging races in the whole calendar. So even though she wasn't able to score points, I believe she did a really good race. I believe she did well in both races, and that's my belief, for the circumstances that she was in, and for this time being her first time in an F1 Academy race as well. So yes, given that she had just virtually a couple days to prepare, unlike all the other girls who've been preparing for about a month now since the last round, I would say that she did incredibly, and she should be given all the applause and props for doing what she did with the amount of preparation time and the amount of warning she got to fill that seat. And obviously injuries don't come with warnings, these things happen, but I think she just did an incredible job. She definitely deserves credit for what she's done in Singapore this past round. I guess the last thing to really mention before we round this out is Nicole Havrider's troubles. She had a very difficult Singapore round, I think that's probably fair to say. She DNF'd in both races. The first one appeared to be sort of a silly mistake, which kind of had that consequence of her DNFing. And she did actually end up going to the hospital to, I believe, check her hands or her wrists, just for the way she ended up crashing. She ended up being cleared and fit to race in race 2, which is obviously fantastic. You never want a driver to be injured in a race and also injured to the extent that they can't compete the next day. That would just be horrible. So I'm really glad, obviously, that she was okay. Race 2 was another DNF. And here's the thing. Someone was always going to crash in race 2 once the rain started. I think that that is probably something fair to say, because no one was going for the pits to change their tires. They were waiting for a safety car. And that safety car was only going to come out when someone crashed. They were kind of just waiting for the race to change and to have that safety car before people were really willing to bite and change their tires. Some people did change before the safety car, don't get me wrong, but majority did not. And so, as I said, in my opinion, someone was going to crash. That was going to be the natural consequence here. And it's obviously a shame it was Nicole after the race 1 DNF she had. I think she just lost the car a bit and then obviously hit the wall, and then that was the end of that. But I think the commentators mentioned that this was her 5th DNF of the season, counting both races. And obviously that's really unfortunate. It's been the product of mistakes as well as unluckiness. I think it's been a combination of the two, but it is concerning. I think that it's definitely a mental challenge, like having that amount of issues, that amount of DNFs. It would definitely be tough mentally. And I don't really know what I think, to be honest. I just think that there's going to have to be some reflections to be had, because obviously DNFs are a combination of a number of factors, but it's definitely been a tough year for her. So I don't know what you do from here, like how you just put that behind you and keep going on. I suppose that's what racers have to do, and I suppose that's why I'm not one, because I have so much anxiety and I dwell on everything that's gone wrong in my life. So I honestly applaud them from moving on the way that they do. It's so impressive. I suppose to round out the year and a possible second year, this is just what Nicole's going to have to do. She's just going to have to knuckle down, get ready for Las Vegas, just prepare as normal, just leave the past in the past and face the new round, just head on, face this as a new challenge and just keep your head up, because like, I guess what else can you do? But as I said, I'm an anxious dweller, so I applaud them so much. The races are so mentally strong. That could never be me. But yeah, difficult one for Nicole Havrida, and I'm glad to see that she was okay after race 1, and I'm really hoping that she picks herself back up and keeps on going and finishes the season on a high note in Las Vegas. So guess what? We finally made it to the end. Finally! I thought that maybe having this different structure would maybe make this a bit shorter, but it absolutely has not done that. In fact, it might even be the opposite. But guess what? We've got a crazy Drivers' Championship battle coming up in Las Vegas, and a pretty good teams battle too. There's still a Constructors' Championship here. I don't think Prema have won it outright yet. I mean, they very well could have. I'll correct myself on screen if I'm wrong. But the Drivers' Championship is Doriane v. Maya. It's going to be a big one in Las Vegas. It all comes down to this. Let's see what happens. No one can know. Maya's on a crazy dominant streak, but Doriane is so consistent. There's nothing else left to say, but bring it on, I suppose. I'm so excited for Las Vegas, the Hello Kitty Grandstand as well. I'm so excited to see that. I have to unfortunately watch from TV, but I'm extremely excited. But for now, I don't think there's anything more to say other than thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later.